Hey guys, welcome back for today's lecture on Wednesday, April 29th. So yesterday we talked about JFK and his shifting of uh, foreign policy from Eisenhower's brinkmanship to his flexible response. We talked about McNamara and his push for cooling of tensions between us and the Soviet Union, but it doesn't take place that way, at least not originally. In 1961, the Soviet Union is trying to push the other Allied countries out of West Berlin. Like they want Berlin to be completely engulfed by East Germany and turn all of Berlin communist. Now the Allies are not going to let that happen. No way. Khrushchev gives them an ultimatum. It says either you guys leave by choice or we'll force you out. We will deploy the military into Berlin and force you out. And the other allies don't bat an eyelash. It doesn't bother them. What he requested was that you guys get your military out of Berlin, but in doing so, that would have just made it so the Soviets could end up taking over all of Berlin. So I guess he wasn't telling them he was going to take Berlin, but ultimately that was what was going to happen. So Kennedy's not on board with it. He's not going to take American troops out of West Berlin. And so at the crossing point of the border, the Soviets pull their tanks down the middle of the road and they put them about 50 yards away from the border in Berlin, facing West Berlin. America takes its tanks and drives them 50 yards from the same gate and points them back at the Soviet tanks. And they just sit there. An old-fashioned Mexican standoff, as they're called. This is the Berlin crisis. Thankfully, cooler heads prevail. They both send their tanks back and no harm is done. But it continues to build a divide in Berlin. And Berlin was having what they called a brain drain, where so many of their smart and elite people were immigrating to West Berlin because they had more economic and individual freedom. So to stop this, the Soviets built the Berlin Wall. Berlin Wall was 87 miles long. It's about 12 feet high. And in most places, it was topped with like barbed wire. And every couple miles, there's a watchtower. It's like a prison yard. And if you tried to cross illegally, you were shot. And the crossing point, the only place where you could possibly get through legally, like through border customs, was called Checkpoint Charlie. Now, Checkpoint Charlie was not used in the early 60s. I mean, it was there, but no one got through. Like, no one was allowed into West Berlin. And no one wanted into East Berlin. So it was like one-way traffic, but it was all shut down for many years. And people were forced to stay on the side that they were fenced in on. Now, this fence was a physical border and physical separation, but it was also a cultural separate. Like, it was a symbol of the division of not just Berlin, not just Germany, and not just Europe, but the world. Like, there was a strong division in the world. And we tried to make it pretty white and black, pretty cut and dry down the middle. You're either on one side or you're not. But, like everything else in life, it's not that cut and dry. It's not that simple. In protest of the Berlin Wall, JFK travels to West Berlin and gives a speech called Ich bin ein Berliner, which translates to I am a Berliner. And what that means is he gives a speech to the people of Berlin, and that was the only German thing he said. Like, he spoke in English, but he gave that closing line in German. But he was sympathizing with West Germany. He was sympathizing with the fact that they'd been divided from their friends and family, and that they were surrounded. They were in an uncomfortable position, being surrounded by the rest of communist East Germany. He said, "Continue your struggle, continue your fight for freedom." So we are all people who are in pursuit of freedom. And because of that, we are all Berliners. I am a Berliner. Or as he said it, Ich bin ein Berliner. He called it Berliner. JFK had a real thick Boston accent. And when he gave that line, the crowd went crazy. And it's another one of his most famous speeches. You could look up JFK's best speeches. I bet if you were to Google just a list of JFK's greatest speeches, his list would be longer than just about any other president. Like, that was his specialty. He could talk. Him and FDR are probably the two greatest speakers we've had as president. So then this escalates into a couple different conflicts. First, we have the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. We talked about both of these in world history a little bit, but to refresh your memory, Fidel Castro takes over in Cuba. He starts a communist regime, and he immediately turns against the U.S., and he joins forces with the Soviet Union. And so the U.S. had plans to get rid of Castro. So a couple thousand Cuban exiles, so people that left Cuba after they went communist, they go to the U.S., and the CIA trains them into becoming soldiers and all that, and they decide to launch an invasion of Cuba with these Cuban exiles to overthrow Castro. Well, the invasion fails epically. They're captured within a couple days, and it makes the U.S. look terrible, makes us look stupid. And Kennedy looks like a chump, and that happens only a couple months into Kennedy's presidency. Like, that's the first thing notable that happens during his presidency. And he's the youngest president ever elected. So when this happens, people think, oh, he's young, he's arrogant, he's in over his head, he's not fit to be president. Like, this is just evidence of his youth and inexperience. And Khrushchev in the Soviet Union thinks he's a chump. Khrushchev thinks he himself is so much better than Kennedy. Like, he's like, I'll be able to crush him. He has no shot. So then, a year later, an American spy plane, another U-2 spy plane, this time flying over Cuba, takes pictures of, man, I don't know why that bar down there is up. Let me try to open this back up again. I hate when that happens. The bottom of the screen was cut off because of the bar. But that picture in the bottom left corner, that was taken by U-2 spy plane. And in the picture is all of these nuclear missiles. All of these weapons of mass destruction. And they are locked and loaded and ready to be shot. And they are, without a doubt, pointed right at the U.S. These are Soviet medium-range missiles, intercontinental missiles. And so when these pictures make their way back to Kennedy, he realizes, holy crap, we have a problem. We have missiles being pointed right at us. At an island that is 90 miles away from Florida. And these missiles can shoot a lot farther than to Florida. You know, these, as you see in the bottom right corner, the missiles could reach nearly Washington, D.C. Now, in this circle here, this is just the distance that those missiles can travel, can be shot to. But their explosion, their detonation, and their damage zones are way bigger than that. Like, let's say they shoot a missile here. This looks like it's probably about Arkansas here. That would for sure damage us here in central Kansas, south central Kansas. That would for sure, within, oh heck, I mean, this is all speculation because it never happened, luckily. But that would, I'm almost certain, kill us within a day or two. Between the radiation spreading and the sheer fires that would spread from it, like that would damage almost the entire country. Because these are way more advanced nuclear weapons than whatever we dropped on Japan. Like, missiles had evolved a ton in the 17 years. So this is serious. And the reason the Soviets put these missiles in Cuba, Cuba asked them to. Castro wanted these missiles there because he hoped that it would scare the U.S. into stopping invading Cuba and trying to depose Castro. And B, the Soviets wanted to do it because they'd found out that America had their own nuclear missiles stationed in Turkey, which Turkey's pretty dang close to the Soviet Union. So, but we don't like that. It scares the daylights out of us. And there was about a 5-day period where John Kennedy did not sleep at all. Like, he never went to bed for about 4 or 5 days. He was constantly either talking to Khrushchev or he was delegating with his cabinet members. Like, this was an extremely tense situation. And nuclear warfare, they realized, would bring about that acronym up there, mutually assured destruction, MAD. Meaning, if we find out that you launched a missile, which we will know if you launch a missile before it lands because our radars will tell us. If we find out you launch a nuclear weapon, we will launch our own. If you want to assure American destruction, then you will have to be willing to live with the fact that you are going to be destroyed as well, because we will launch them back. Mutually assured destruction was definitely considered at this time. It was known that if you get hit, or if we get hit, you're getting hit too. And are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to make that sacrifice? And so we stand, this is basically just a showdown. Like, Kennedy won't back down, Khrushchev won't back down. Their fingers are on the big red button and they are ready to press it whenever. This is the closest we ever got to World War III, by far. This was so tense. Like, the people at home, this wasn't a time where like all information was at our fingertips like it is now. Like, news wasn't around the clock, and there weren't sources everywhere in government to where everything was known immediately. But every night people would listen to the radio or watch the news, and they were not sure if, when they woke up in the morning, if the world would be a fiery blaze around them. It was crazy how tense it was. If you have any family members, like grandparents, that were alive during this time, ask them about it. Ask them if they remember anything, if it really was that tense. My mom was not born yet at this time. My dad was 1 year old, so he doesn't know anything. But my grandparents talk about it, and they may not have been extremely scared of this individual, like the Cuban Missile Crisis itself, because they didn't know much about it at the time. Like I said, it wasn't commonly known until later on, after the fact. But during this time in general, and in the 50s, there were, schools did nuclear bomb drills. I may have showed a video last year in your world history class. Like, we have tornado drills and fire drills. Back then, they had nuclear bomb drills, where you stacked your books on your desk and you crawled under your desk. Like that would have any impact on a nuclear bomb hitting you. But they did it. So this is by far the closest we come to World War III. And we have this system. It's known as the Defense Readiness Condition, Defense Readiness Conflict, maybe. Yeah, shoot. We shortened it we call it DEFCON. Maybe you guys have heard of DEFCON. We have 5 DEFCON levels. I'll show them here. Readiness condition. Yeah, defense readiness condition. 5 DEFCON levels, and they go backwards. DEFCON 5, normal day. Like, we are, there's no immediate threat of nuclear warfare, no deploying of forces. We're fine. There's DEFCON 4, which code name is Double Take, which is something's brewing. We better deploy some intelligence to keep an eye on this. Up your security measures, increase the U-2 spy plane mission, stuff like that. So you're aware something may be brewing, but it's nothing to freak out about. You don't really tell the people at home, hey, be careful. Then DEFCON 3 is Roundhouse. Well, now, those spy planes have seen something that's reason to worry. And we need to be ready. Air Force is ready to go in 15 minutes, and we could probably deploy some soldiers, within a couple days. DEFCON 2 is called Fast Pace, where it's a standoff and it's serious, and we better be ready to fight because it just might happen. It's getting close. And at that level, Air Force, the planes are on the tarmac, and their engines are on. They're just waiting to take off, and the rest of the armed forces are ready to be deployed in a matter of hours. That is fingers on the button, and we're just waiting to see if they press it. And then DEFCON 1 is called cocked pistol. That's where war is imminent. Air Force has been sent, and now it's just a countdown from 10 or 5 as to when the missiles are launched. We obviously in our history have never had a DEFCON 1, or else that would mean that a nuclear missile was shot. We have had DEFCON 2 twice. First time was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The second time was Operation Desert Storm in 1990 in the Persian Gulf War. But I would say the Cuban Missile Crisis was probably closer to DEFCON 1 than Desert Storm was. Like, Cuban Missile Crisis is the closest we've come to nuclear war. So we've had a couple DEFCON 3s. I know 9/11, after 9/11, we were at DEFCON 3 for a couple days. The axe murder incident in South Korea. You guys remember me last year talking about when North Korean troops murdered American and South Korean troops because they tried to cut down a tree? That escalated things to DEFCON 3, but DEFCON 2 was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and man, it was close to DEFCON 1. It really was. I don't think people realized just how close we were, and that would have changed the world dramatically. Sent a question really easy. What DEFCON level was the Cuban Missile Crisis? Hey, I said it like 6 times. So that's your question. Put that on the sent your questions document. And let's see, tomorrow on Thursday, we will have a Zoom meeting for everybody. And it'll be, we'll have a question of the day. We'll talk. I'll kind of lay out the plan from here on out, and just checking in, that kind of stuff. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up, email me. I'll answer them. Other than that, we'll call her good. Have a good day, guys.